Florida was not too far away from reaching their best case scenario last season. If they don't throw away the game against LSU and then they find a way to beat Alabama, which they had a chance in that game. If you do those two things, you go to the college football playoff with one loss, and that's probably the best case scenario for Florida last year. And they were not that far away from doing that. And then it kind of unraveled there at the end when you lose to LSU and Alabama, then the loss to Oklahoma, which of course they didn't have a whole lot of guys, a whole lot of their starters out there. But it was definitely not a worst case scenario type season because they did beat Georgia. They did win the SEC East. So there were some great accomplishments last season. But when we look at the best case scenario, yes, it was the college football playoff last year. Is it the playoff this year? Is that something that is a reasonable goal? Well, let's take a look at the things that will have to happen if this team is going to reach their best case scenario. And we start at number one. Emory Jones can pass, and of course he can throw a football, but how does he develop as a passer? And when we talk about Emory Jones, we're also going to talk about Anthony Richardson, if he winds up being the guy for them. But it feels like Emory Jones is going to be the starting quarterback for Florida. It's his time, and if he can rise to the occasion and he can develop as a passer, improve as a passer, we know what he can do running the football. I mean, the guy averaged like 4 or 5 yards per carry even when the defense knew that the run was coming from him. So he can run the football, and it's going to be a different offense this year. They're going to run it a lot more. They're going to use the quarterback to run it a lot more. It'll just be a different offense. It will not be that passing attack that we saw last season. But if he can do enough, if he can throw the football when they need him to and get this team from being one-dimensional, you don't want to be one-dimensional, I think that's going to go a really long way for Florida. And if he can do that, the pieces are there. This offense has a chance to be really, really good. They're going to be able to run the football if the offensive line can step up. And if you can throw the football as well, it becomes very tough to stop this Dan Mullen offense. And we're going to go right back to the offensive line here for number two. The offensive line is going to have to improve for Florida to reach their best case scenario. You look at last year, I think they were better. There was some improvement there, but they really couldn't run the football. And that was, again, an issue for them. You go back to last season, and they just never really were able to do a whole lot on the ground. Dameon Pierce, Malik Davis both averaged 4.7 yards per carry, which is not horrible, but it's just not going to be good enough. And then pass protection as well, of course, which maybe it won't be as big of a deal when you look at 2021 because of Emory Jones and his ability to move around. But they need to find a run game, and you've got guys there. We're not really going to question the running back position because I think that is an area where they're going to be just fine. It's going to be about the offensive line. But when you talk about this run game, you've got Malik Davis back and Dameon Pierce back, two capable backs. You've got Lorenzo Lingard, a former 5-star who really didn't do much last year. Can he step up now? And, of course, Demarcus Bowman, probably the most talented back on this roster. You've got plenty of weapons. Naquan Wright there as well. I mean, they're going to have the running backs. It's going to come down to that offensive line. If they can improve there, this team, again, if you get an offensive line that can block and you've got Emory Jones and he can develop as a passer, this offense is going to be really tough to stop. I know there are some young wide receivers, which we'll get to in just a second, but those are going to be the two big keys. They do lose some guys on the offensive line. Stone Forsythe, Brett Hagee, Will Harrod, but all guys that are gone. They've got other guys in there, so we'll see how it plays out. They've got some guys that have experience, maybe haven't started a ton of games, but they have some talent on this offensive line, but it's going to be a big question for them. Can they improve in that area? And then just talked about the receivers for a second. Can the young wide receivers step up for Florida? This will be another big key for them. I'm not super concerned about this. I think the talent is there, and the wide receiver position is usually, I would say the wide receiver position is the area that I am least concerned about if I'm a fan, because there are plenty of talented wide receivers. Now, are they going to be able to do what they did last year with Grimes and Tony, and then Pitts, of course, at tight end, or if you want, or wide receiver, tight end, whatever you want to call him? Are they going to be able to do that? Probably not, but you've got Jacob Copeland coming back. You've got some young guys in Xavier Henderson. How about Trent Whittemore last year? He looked pretty good when he was in there. Of course, he got injured in that one game, I believe, against Texas A&M. Justin Shorter, a talented kid. Now he has a chance to maybe be that number 2 guy for them. So there are wide receivers on this roster. There is talent there. And can they step up? Can they play at a very high level for Florida this year? And again, it doesn't have to be as good as it was last year. Those receivers were great. But if you can just play at a high level, like I said, yes, Florida's, you put all this together. You got Emory Jones, if he can throw the football. The offensive line improves. The young wide receivers step up. We know they're going to have talent at running back. Not concerned there. This Florida offense becomes really tough to stop. And if all this comes together, we're talking about a top 5 offense in the country. I mean, this team could be almost unstoppable offensively. But now we have to go to the defense, which was, again, an area of concern last year, of course. They need to first improve the run defense. That is going to be something that has to get better for Florida. When you look at the teams that they're going to be playing this year, they will have to stop the run better than they did last year if they're going to reach, again, their best case scenario. They were 71st in the run defense last year. Defensive line was pretty strong for them, of course, especially in the pass rush. But the linebackers, they're going to have to come down and help out a little bit more in the run game. That's something that I'm really looking for Florida. That's the first key for the defense. The other key is going to be getting some help for Kyer Elam in the secondary. And, I'm talking about cornerback, who's going to be that number 2 guy for them. But really, it's the entire secondary. They lost a lot of guys back there in the secondary, especially at the safety position. You do lose Marco Wilson at cornerback. Chester Kimbrough, he transferred out, not really too big of a deal. But who's going to be that other corner, that guy on the opposite side of Elam? We're talking about Jaden Hill. Maybe he steps into that role. It's going to be really interesting. Really interesting to see that cornerback spot. But even more so behind them, the safeties. You lose Sean Davis. You lose Donovan Steiner. You lose Brad Stewart. C.J. McWilliams transferred out. So you're going to have a lot of question marks there at that safety position. And just the secondary as a whole. You've got to get some help for Kyer Elam. I think he's the best player on this defense, maybe the best player on this team. I mean, he's that good at that cornerback spot. We know what we're going to get from him. He's going to be the main guy here on defense for them. He's got to get some help in the secondary. If he can get some help, if they can improve there, that's going to be huge. You go back to last year, they were 100 in pass defense. That has to improve. Again, Elam has done his part, but he's going to need some help in 2021 if this team is able to get to that best case scenario. So here's the schedule. Again, they were 8-4 last year. A little bit deceptive there. I think they were, better than most 8-4 teams. But you look to 2021, and we're talking again about the best case scenario for Florida here. There are some games where I feel like as long as they just do what we expect them to do, they're going to win. And really, there's 9 of those games. I think you have 9 games where Florida should win. Kentucky on the road is going to be a tough matchup, but talent-wise, Florida has an advantage there. If they are playing at their, again, all these things we talked about, all those things come true for them, they're going to beat Kentucky. They're going to beat Tennessee. They're going to beat South Carolina. Missouri will be another tough game. But if they take care of business, they should be able to win these 9 games. But when we talk about the best case scenario, you've still got Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. 3 really tough games. And I just don't see Florida winning all 3 of these games. Again, even if it goes as good as it can go, they get to that best case scenario, I don't think they can win all 3 of these games. It's just too tough. Too many question marks. If things go really well for them, I think you get to 11-1. I think that is the best case scenario for Florida in the regular season. Obviously, you want to have one of those losses to either Alabama or LSU. Want to beat Georgia, want to win the division and go to the SEC championship. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to beat Alabama and LSU and lose to Georgia, not have to play in the SEC championship. But these are all 3 tough games. Alabama is going to be very tough, especially early in the season. But it is a home game. LSU is also going to be really tough, especially on the road. They've got some issues off the field. Maybe could they potentially have some problems between now and then? It's possible. And then Georgia, of course, is going to be that big game. So I think best case scenario for Florida is 11-1. Me personally, if I'm making a prediction and giving you a little bit of a spoiler here, I'm more in line with 10-2, I think, being their best case scenario. 9-3, 10-2 is kind of my prediction for this team. But again, if everything goes perfect for them and all the things we talked about, the defense improves, the offensive line improves, Emory Jones becomes a great passer to go with his running ability. If all of that happens, I could see Florida going 11-1 and being right there in the mix for a college football playoff berth in 2021.